Welcome to Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, where we believe Benjamin Franklin's advice that an investment in knowledge pays the best interest, both in finances and in your life. Every episode teaches you personal finance and long-term investing in simple terms. Now, here's your host, Jesse Kramer.
Welcome to Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, episode 125. I'm Jesse Kramer. By day, I work at a fiduciary wealth management firm helping clients nationwide. You can learn more at bestinterest.blog/work. The link is in the show notes. And by night, I write the Best Interest blog and I host this podcast. I also put out a weekly email newsletter, and all of those projects, all of them help busy professionals and retirees avoid mistakes and grow their wealth by simplifying their investing, their taxes, and their retirement planning. Today, in the spirit of Christmas and inspired by Charles Dickens, we're going to do a sort of past, present, and future episode. My hope is that you all listening will walk away from this episode with a few interesting ideas to implement in your financial life, or maybe to stick in your stocking for a later time. First, as always, we'll start with a very quick review of the week. This is a 5-star review from Apple Podcasts, and a t-shirt will be going to Gig Harbor, Washington. The review says, insightful and entertaining, 5 stars. Quick note of appreciation from a longtime listener. Your recent episode summarizing the complexity of planning with a special needs child was right on target. For anyone on this journey, it's a maze of uncertainty and worry. Episodes like this help many of us in processing the total investment landscape. And for those of you hearing that and you're curious, that was episode 119, was a deep dive into financial planning with a special needs child. And thank you very much for those comments, Gig Harbor, Washington. Feel free to reach out to me to jesse@bestinterest.blog, and I will get a super soft podcast t-shirt mailed your way. And as this is the last episode of the year, I first want to do a very quick, brief year in review. As of this recording, which I'm recording right now on the first day of December, about 110,000 people have tuned into Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors this year. And that is simply amazing and awesome. And I'm so thankful to all of you listening. I'd wager I've received probably more than 1,000 emails this year from you, hundreds of listener questions that I've used for the AMA episodes and for blog posts over at bestinterest.blog. By year end, there will probably be 45 new articles on the blog and 29 new podcast episodes this year. Many of you have reached out as well about working with me professionally as your financial planner, me being your financial planner, hiring my firm to be your full-time wealth management firm. And sometimes for you to be the client, but just as often as a referral for a loved one in your life or an aging parent or a spouse, just in case you get hit by a bus, having that backup plan. And it's just a huge honor that many of you trust me in that way. And you might have noticed here on the podcast that I don't run mattress ads. I don't sell gut health supplements. I don't sell banking products even. I don't sell a course. What I do, though, is remind you that I work for a fiduciary wealth management firm and I help clients nationwide. And I absolutely love all this work that I do. And I can say for now, at least for the first half of 2026, I will be accepting new clients. So if you're interested in starting that conversation, again, you can go to the website, bestinterest.blog/work, and you can find out more there. And thank you once again for listening. Here's to a Merry Christmas and a great start to 2026. But on this Christmas Eve episode, stealing idea, maybe from the guys over at Stacking Benjamins, who I know they've done a similar episode like this before, though I swear we independently came to this idea, both stealing it from Charles Dickens. I want to be visited by the ghosts of past, present, and future. Not necessarily Christmas past, present, and future, but financial past, present, and future. So I'm going to share some fun stories, some lessons along the way, some timelines from my financial upbringing, and then I'll share with you a quick deep dive on my financial present, specifically my systems, my habits, how I track things, how I invest, how we're insured, those sort of details. Now, for the financial future, I thought about a few different directions to take the future route of this Dickens episode. And the two routes I settled on is one, I'm going to share with you just a little bit about what I think the future of kind of the financial education and financial planning and what those future industries look like. And then also I want to share with you maybe just a little bit. I'm happy to share with you a little bit about my personal goals for the future, financial goals for the future, my family's financial goals for the future, and putting on my financial planner hat, some thoughts on what they are and how we're aiming to get there.
The ghost of financial past appears before Jesse, carrying a dripping mop in one hand and a package of water bottles in the other. Wearing a super soft Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors t-shirt, the ghost urged Jesse to tell of his earliest financial beginnings.
So the ghost of financial past, one of my money beginnings, one of the stories that I first think about kind of my relationship with money was the summer of 2001. I was 11 years old and I really wanted to play the game Age of Empires 2. If you're not familiar with Age of Empires 2, it's a computer game where you start out controlling this small village and you collect resources, you build new buildings, you grow the village, you research new technology, eventually you raise an army, and you go out into the map, if you will, and conquer some enemies who are doing the same thing as you are. And to this day, Age of Empires 2 is considered one of the best computer games of all time, actually. People still play it. Seriously, you can go onto YouTube right now and watch people playing a 25-year-old computer game. But I don't think it's coincidental that this game appealed to me. It's strategic. It's about resource management. The same brain that loves those games also loves personal finance and investing and tax planning and economics. It all kind of makes sense. It's a game that expects and rewards your patience. You know, you plant the seeds early of technology choices and resource placement and early expansion. And then later on, you kind of harvest the bounty of planting those early seeds. And people who enjoy that rhythm, they often like real world planning too. They're the people who don't mind playing the long game. It's also a game of systems. The real joy is kind of in the machinery underneath. There's supply lines and technology trees and trade routes and building different military units. It's a game where you want to understand why something works rather than just enjoying the flashy outcome of it. It's also a game of control, not necessarily micromanagement though. The game gives you agency without demanding every little tiny detail. You know, it's about steering the ship and choosing priorities and allocating resources, but not necessarily diving into every single bit of minutia. And I see a similarity where I like deciding how to allocate my assets, but I don't necessarily want to vote in every single company's proxy. I'll let the mutual funds and the ETFs take care of that for me. It's a game about smart decisions compounding over time. It's a game about optimization, but not obsessively so. I think the same instinct that makes people enjoy budgeting and enjoy home projects or gardening or building a business is the same kind of thing that is the same reason why I enjoyed Age of Empires 2. But I had a major problem, and that's what I'm getting to. The game cost $50. And at 11 years old, I didn't have $50. And my parents, as great as they are, they weren't going to simply gift me the money for a computer game. I had to earn it. And I'm sure I could have done chores around the house. I could have collected soda cans for 5 cents a piece or something like that. But I had a different idea. My older brother was playing in summer league baseball, 15 games over 2 months, half of them being home games. And each game had a few dozen parents and grandparents up and down the first and the third baseline. Maybe those people could be customers, I thought. And my idea was to open up a small concession stand and sell to them, sell to those fans. So my dad lent me some money so I could go to Sam's Club and buy some inventory. And thankfully, that bank, the bank of Dad, happened to charge 0 interest. And knowing what I know now, I can't believe I only borrowed $50 at 0 interest, but it was what it was. I bought waters and soda and candy bars and chips and packs of gum, maybe some other things too. And I'd load up a cooler with ice before every game. I'd throw some drinks in there. I'd sit behind home plate with my little sign. And it worked. My summer revenue ended up being well over $100, more than enough to pay back my dad the $50 that I borrowed and buy my very own copy of Age of Empires 2. I certainly learned the pride of entrepreneurship and earning your own money and then using that money to do something that brings you joy. And yes, for what it's worth, I am definitely glad I bought that game. I spent hours and hours and hours playing it. It was so much fun. That said, I also think there are some wonderful and funny lessons, some real world lessons that we can all apply, some lessons to learn from my experience. First, the products. So gums and chips and candy are the things that maybe 11-year-old Jesse really enjoyed and would have wanted to buy at a baseball game, but not necessarily something that my customers, who are almost all adults, were really pining for. Now, by far, water was my best selling item. It wasn't even close. So if I had to do it all over again, it's not necessarily what you want, it's what your customers want. Okay, good lesson there. Now, second, a lesson about pricing. Being the little math nerd that I was, I decided to simply take my unit cost and double it to determine my unit price. In other words, since bulk water bottles ended up being, 27 cents a bottle, I doubled that to 54 cents a bottle. I rounded up to 55 cents to make it a quote unquote round number. And that's what my price was, 55 cents for a bottle of water. So there I am running my little cash register out of a plastic bag full of nickels and dimes, and people are giving me $1 and I'm giving them back 45 cents and change. Of course, everyone's lives would have been so much easier and so much better if I'd simply charged $1 for a bottle of water, and no adult in the right mind would have really balked at that. So I'm not sure what I was thinking there. Third, and this is perhaps the best lesson to learn, there's nothing wrong with a subtle, soft reminder. Now, I remember being too nervous and too shy, especially with the other team's fans, to simply walk down to their fans along whatever baseline they were and say something like, hey, if you're thirsty or hungry, I've got some concessions behind home plate. Simple, just a simple message, right? Now, I was too shy to go say that. Now, most of them probably didn't even know I was back there behind home plate, right? They had no idea I was there. I was just sitting there with my sign. I think I had watched too much Field of Dreams, speaking of baseball references. If you build it, they will come. Well, here in the real world, where you don't have dead baseball players walking out of cornfields, it's if you build it and tell them about it, they will come, at least most of the time. You've got to tell them about it at least a little bit. And I know some of you probably roll your eyes here on the podcast when I say every episode that I do financial planning work with clients at a fiduciary wealth management firm, blah, 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 blah. I get it. But guess what? If I never said it, most of you would never know. And I think there's nothing wrong with just that soft reminder. Anyway, on with that. Let's go to the next story. My first real job was at a place called Fairhaven Beach State Park, a beautiful state park with a wonderful beach in the village of Fairhaven, New York. And for my first summer there, I think I was 16 years old, I was a cleaner. I rode around in a little electric cart with my mop bucket and my Johnny brush. And mostly I cleaned bathrooms all day. I also cleaned cabins and some other buildings there on the park campus. But mostly I was a bathroom cleaner. Minimum wage at the time was $7.25 an hour. I earned an impressive $7.60 per hour. And one of my memories from that summer cleaning bathrooms was doing the math where I earned a penny basically every 5 seconds. And the memory is sitting there in the bathroom, cleaning toilets, a Johnny brush in my hand, thinking to myself, another penny in the bank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another penny in the bank. And so one of the lessons there is if you're thinking that, if you were literally counting the pennies entering your bank account at work, you've probably got to find something else to do. I know many people work in jobs they aren't totally passionate about, but holy God, if you're visualizing pennies going into a bank with a Johnny brush in your hand, you got to find something else to do. It's so much better when your paycheck is actually just an ancillary component of the work you do. I know we might not all get there, but it is a better place to be, a better place to work. But I stuck with it. For the full summer, I earned my checks, and my first $450 check, that was 2 weeks' pay, after taxes were removed. It felt pretty amazing. Though it was also my first foray into income taxes. I'd earned $550, but the federal and taxes in New York State withholding took away 20% or whatever it was. Now, for the record, I had not yet heard of a Roth IRA, and I certainly did not take advantage of a Roth IRA. And to think that one summer of missed Roth IRA contributions could have been $150 billion for my great-great-grandchildren in the year 2200. I will never get that time back. So a younger dad, probably in his late 30s at the time, he was taking pity on me as his little boys got sand and lake water all over the bathroom floor that I had just mopped. And we spoke for a couple minutes, and I could tell he was thinking, Jesus Christ, this young guy is a career bathroom cleaner, and he's 16, he's a teenager and he's just stuck cleaning bathrooms. I've got to try to impart some career advice to him. And he started with some line like, it's got to be nice spending time here in the park. Pretty good career at the state, a lot of opportunities for career growth. Do you have some good opportunities in front of you? And I smiled and I said, yeah, I'll be a high school senior next year. I'm applying to colleges right now. And man, it was like a 2,000-pound weight came off his shoulders. Anyway, just a little funny story there. But here's another good lesson. Going into summer number 2, they rehired me as a cleaner. Again, more toilets, more cabins, more emergency calls at you got to come to this bathroom right now after 4th of July weekend because it's a disaster. You do not want to get one of those calls. But unsurprisingly, my heart was not in it. In fact, I was actually kind of dreading the idea of spending another summer cleaning toilets. And in my first week of that second summer, I ran into one of the 3 bigwigs at the park, one of the 3 main managers. And I remember the conversation. I said, hey, Tom, listen, I'm grateful to be a cleaner and I'll do it as long as you need me to do it. But if an opportunity opens up on the maintenance team, I'd like to be considered for that opportunity. And of course, he said, Jesse, there's nothing right now, but actually something might be in the works. We might have an opening by the end of the week. I'll let you know. Sure enough, someone quit. And he quit in a pretty unique role, actually, at the park. Most of the people, they mowed lawns and split wood, and they did so from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. But the guy who quit had a hybrid role from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., including on weekends. And there was some physical labor and maintenance in the afternoons, but then there was also a lot of after-hours customer service. When a camper calls to complain that the previous campers left a mess at the campsite, I would get the call, I would drive up to the site, I would apologize, I would calm them down, and I would clean up the mess. And once the rest of the maintenance team left at 4 p.m., I was one of the only people left in the park. So I had autonomy to work on whatever needed it, to chat with park goers who needed to speak to someone. And I absolutely loved that job. It was perfect for me. I spent time on my feet. I was outside. I was driving around the park. I did some manual labor, but I was always talking to people, solving their problems, having a little chat, a little bit of everything. And I certainly was never counting the pennies as they dribbled into my imaginary piggy bank. Now, if I hadn't gone out of my way to ask Tom for other opportunities at the park, I probably would have cleaned toilets until the day I quit in frustration. So I think there's a pretty nice career lesson in there to be on the lookout for opportunities. Don't be afraid to ask that question. You know, ask your boss the question. It can't hurt. You know, maybe you can help the people in charge to actually solve their problems while you're also solving your problem at the same time. It's time to fast forward a little bit further into the future to about 2014 or so. I'm 24 years old. My real career is underway. And I like this story because it's how I stumbled exactly into what I'm doing right now. And if you've heard me talk enough on the podcast, you might be somewhat familiar with some of this story. I'm a huge believer that having some skin in the game will naturally steer you down the path to learning more about the game that you happen to be playing. And for me, it was a couple years into my career, logging into my 401k and seeing, the cost of a new car sitting there in my account balance. I don't remember the exact number, if I'm being honest with you, probably somewhere in that $20,000 to $30,000 range. All of it at the time was invested into a 2050 target date fund for when I'd be 60 years old. I was happy enough with all those facts. I was happy enough putting money away and seeing it grow. But I wanted to learn more. I wanted to just understand truly the nuts and bolts of what was going on. And I liked learning about personal finance. I'd never learned it really growing up. My parents instilled some pretty good lessons and principles, but I didn't know the specifics. So I started learning more, a little self-study. Then I discovered the FIRE movement. Then I discovered the Boglehead's book on investing. Then I discovered the world of blogs and podcasts and all this stuff. Fast forward to late 2018, I decided to start my own blog. The Best Interest was born. And then early 2021, this podcast was born. In mid-2021, losing some of my passion for being an aerospace engineer, I started the conversations that eventually led to me switching careers and now working in wealth management. And, the idea at the time was simple. I thought to myself, I know a good amount about financial planning and investing. I'd love to learn more from smart people. Some of my audience members already want to pay me for advice. It would be good to work for an established and reputable firm if I were to do that. And then I had this kind of interesting way of finding clients. Here's a little bit of inside baseball for those of you who are curious. In the world of wealth management, financial planning, investment management, referrals are still the king. Friends tell friends, accountants and attorneys point people your way. If you do good work as a financial planner, your referrals will compound like sleepy dollar cost average index funds, right? It's great. So referrals are still king. The problem is when you're just starting out, no one's really going to want to refer to you, right? There's no time for the compounding to have actually started. Some financial advisors, they buy leads through a service like Smart Asset, which maybe you've heard of. Some advisors provide seminars in the community, learning opportunities at libraries and community centers, and they want to pitch you whatever they're selling at the end of the seminar. Some advisors really dive down into a niche, or they become the go-to person at the country club or on the social scene or something like that. But here I am with this blog and podcast doing something that was certainly relatively unique 4 years ago. Nowadays, I think there are, a few dozen financial planners like me who I know of who are successfully building their practice solely through the free education they provide in content, blogs, podcasts, YouTube videos, or whatever it may be. Some advisors dabble in content creation, but in my experience, few stick with it long enough to reap the iceberg effect, where, most of your audience is quietly watching, but not really saying a word. Now, most of you listening, you've probably never reached out to me, and that's totally okay. Most of the podcasts I listen to, right, the person producing the podcast, they have no idea who I am. Although, until one day, one of my listeners will email or connect on LinkedIn or fill out the Work with Jesse form, and they'll say, hey, I've been listening for years. Can we talk? So it's just interesting how 11-ish years ago was the time when I first felt like I had enough skin in the game in my own personal finances to say, you know what, I should really sit down and learn what's going on here. And then, just reading book after book and consuming expert blog post after expert blog post and just diving into the details as much as I possibly could. Here I am 11 years later. Here's a quick ad, and then we'll get back to the show. I send a free weekly email to thousands of readers that shares 2 simple things, just 2. The first are my new articles and podcasts, so you'll never miss when I publish new content. And the second is my favorite financial content from other corners of the internet, so you can see what's been helping me the most.
But Jesse, I don't want another email.
I hear you. I make this newsletter short, sweet, and full of essential information, and readers enjoy that. About 85% of newsletter subscribers are engaging with the newsletter more than once a month. They're enjoying it, and you will too. You can subscribe for free on the homepage at bestinterest.blog, and you'll get a free PDF of my white paper titled The Step-by-Step Guide to Building Your Retirement Paycheck. That's right, a free weekly email that thousands of people like you are already reading, a free white paper to help you plan for retirement, and you can sign up for free at bestinterest.blog.
A net worth spreadsheet unfurls itself before Jesse, upheld by what must be the second ghost, the ghost of financial present. The ghost opens his mouth and countless receipts start falling out. Amazon, Wegmans, diapers, applesauce pouches, more diapers. How much applesauce can one small child eat?
And now we are in the financial present. So I thought I'd do two things here. First, I want to tell you exactly what I do in my own family's finances. My goal is to really leave no stone unturned here. And second, I want to tell you some stories of my favorite wins from the world of financial planning, my financial planning practice, where we looked at a situation, a person, the numbers, we gave some advice, and we had a terrific outcome. First, let's do the family finances. Like I said before, I won't share my precise numbers here because that feels a little bit exposing or just a little bit weird. In the eye of the beholder, I suppose, who knows how you'll interpret my numbers. So instead, I just want to describe to you, again, without the numbers, but in pretty precise detail, how we save and contribute to various accounts, our cash management system and emergency funds and credit card usage, our view on debt, how we use debt, and the steps we take to burn down our debt. I'll talk about our asset allocation, how we're invested across various accounts and why. I'll talk about insurance, how and why we're insured, taxes, how we use our HSA account, our home and the thoughts that went into buying it, and then last, how we budget and how we spend. So first things first, savings. This year will be the first year in a while where both my wife and I are maxing out our 401k retirement plans. In recent years, with other priorities that I'll get into, we just didn't have the cash flow to max out both those accounts. My wife maxes out her Roth IRA month by month. For me, though, simply, again, due to cash flow conservatism, I'll wait until filing taxes before I make my year prior Roth IRA contribution. For many years, we've both maxed out our Roth IRAs. Now, just in case you aren't familiar with that, if you didn't know, for here in 2025, you can make your IRA contribution not until December 31st of this year. You actually have until you file taxes in 2026 to make your IRA contribution for the 2025 year. Moving on to the HSA account, we max out our family HSA account throughout the year. And as I alluded to in a couple of minutes, I'll share how we actually use our HSA account. We're putting away a couple $100s a month into a 529 account right now, assuming it'll eventually go toward our children's educational spending. And beyond those qualified investment vehicles, we don't have too much extra cash flow to save into, for example, a taxable account, but that's okay. We're in a reasonably expensive season of life right now. We have one baby, we have a second baby on the way. We have a newish house to us that we've been renovating bit by bit, not only paying the mortgage, but actually putting money into to make the house nicer. Both of us had cars that kicked the bucket recently. My wife's was 17 years old, mine was 13 years old. So we've been using our excess cash flow to spend or to replenish rather than to save. And I think that's okay. Because despite that spending, we're still using our retirement accounts pretty well to save pretty large dollar amounts each year. Now, on to the next topic for cash management. And at least here's the way I think of the word cash management. It's really, how you're using your banks and your bank accounts and your savings and thinking about that. So I still have my legacy bank accounts from when I was single, and so does my wife. My checking and her checking are the two accounts that we separately use as our kind of base of operations for earning and for spending. But importantly, we do have a joint savings and a joint checking account through one of the online high-yield banks. And those shared accounts serve a couple important purposes, at least in my mind. First, it makes it pretty easy and seamless for us to move money back and forth to one another when needed. And second, we use the shared account to pay certain large shared bills like the mortgage. So if I had to start from scratch right now, I genuinely think we would do the following. We would establish a relationship with a local bank to us here in Rochester where we could both have a joint savings and a joint checking account. We would keep our joint accounts with the high yield bank online, and that's pretty much it, right? Our cash management in practice is very much a shared experience. We don't do too much solo. It's just that due to the inertia of our old accounts and our old e-connections and all of those old things we had when single, it made sense for us to keep all those legacy accounts to just layer on a couple joint accounts on top of that, and it works really, really well for us. The next topic I wanted to cover is our debt, how I view it, and the extra steps we take to burn it down. So right now, the only debt we have on our balance sheet is our house, but it's a bigger mortgage than I'd like, and it's a mortgage we got in the summer of 2023. So the interest rate is 6.5%, which is not my favorite. Now, it doesn't keep me up at night. We're making our payments every month in a pretty comfortable way, but still, I've had a goal for the past couple years to make one extra principal-only payment each year. So on top of the 12 regular monthly payments, one more extra payment all to principal. And based on the admittedly depressing math of a 30-year mortgage, this principal-only payment gets us just as much equity in the house as the other 12 payments combined. So yikes. But to be clear, yes, I'm using a few $1,000s that could go into a taxable brokerage investing account, could be invested in the stock market for the next 30 years, and instead I am choosing to pay down a 6.5% mortgage. Some of you might be thinking, why, oh why are you doing that? You can call it risk mitigation, you can call it schmuck insurance, you can just call it diversification, you can take your pick. Through our 401k, our Roth IRAs, and our HSA, we're already committing a lot of money each year for our long-term retirement goals. We're committing a lot of money into the stock market. We're taking on plenty of risk in that way. This extra mortgage payment is a way for me to feel like we're also locking in some smaller gains. We're preventing future 6.5% interest payments, guaranteed. The thing I'll sit down and talk to clients all the time is saying, would you rather have a risky 9 or 10% or a guaranteed 6.5%? Now, to each their own, but what I'm essentially telling you right now listening is that I'm taking a bit of both, right? We have plenty of money going into our qualified retirement accounts, going into the stock market, where we are taking our chances for a risky 8 or 9 or 10% per year. And then with other money, I am taking the guaranteed 6.5%. To me, that feels good. We're burning down the debt on our family shelter. That feels really good too. So that's my take on debt and mortgage payments. The next topic in our current financial plan is our asset allocation, how we're invested across various accounts and why. So our retirement accounts are all 80% plus invested into low-cost stock index fund with roughly a 60-40 exposure to US stock market versus international stock markets. Our health savings account has a few $1,000s of cash in it, just in case I do want to use that cash to start reimbursing medical expenses sooner than later. But the rest of the HSA account is invested into stock index funds for the long run. Our 529 education savings account is invested in, well, first off, it's custodied with the New York State 529 plan, which is all allocated and managed by Vanguard. And it's invested in one of their target enrollment date funds. Very, very similar to a target retirement date fund, except it's an enrollment date. It's a year-by-year date based on when your children are going to enter college. So that one's pretty straightforward and easy and low cost. Our taxable monies, we do have a small taxable account, are about 50% in cash. And really, I count all of our bank accounts and our emergency fund in there. To me, it's all the same taxable bucket. So if I look at our bank accounts, our emergency fund, and our taxable investment account, you would see that our taxable monies are about 50% cash and then the 50% invested into stock index funds. We do have a couple funny niche allocations. I own some shares of Berkshire Hathaway, not because I did all the investment research that ought to go into a decision like that, but instead because I just wanted to own it. Go Warren Buffett. It's just like owning a Michael Jordan jersey to me. I own a couple B shares of Berkshire Hathaway. And I also own a little bit of a Bitcoin ETF and Ethereum ETF, mainly for schmuck insurance, and partially too because I wanted to feel motivated to learn more about it. Speaking of insurance, let's talk about insurance, how and why we're insured. So we have 6 types of insurance in my house. We have homeowners. Homeowners insurance is basic and straightforward, part of having a mortgage. There's nothing flashy, at least that I know of, about our homeowners insurance policy. Same goes for our auto insurance. We have liability, as everyone needs to have by law. We also have collision. So liability protects other people from your mistakes, the injuries you cause, the property you damage, but it doesn't fix your car. Now, collision, though, protects your car when you hit something, another car, a tree, a mailbox, something like that. If your vehicle is damaged from an impact, collision is the bucket that pays for that. We do not have comprehensive insurance, which covers any other type of damage or break-in or something like that isn't covered by collision. We do not have comprehensive insurance. We also have an umbrella insurance policy. And to me, umbrella insurance prevents that rare, awful accident from turning into some sort of financial crater. It protects your wealth. It protects your future earnings. It protects some of your peace of mind. And umbrella, kind of like the name implies, it sits on top of your other insurance policies and says, if there comes a point where my homeowner's insurance or my auto insurance doesn't cover whatever cost is going on, whatever liability is going on, because there's some sort of really big liability overflow, well, umbrella insurance can kick in then. And the reason why people buy it is because, they drive, they own a home with guests coming and going, they have teenage drivers in the house, they have assets to protect. they want some sleep at night insurance. So not everybody always needs umbrella insurance, but I think it's a question from a financial planning point of view. It's a question worth looking into, just seeing if your family situation would benefit from an umbrella policy. I have disability insurance through work. Now, if you believe the insurance industry, which seems like a reasonable stat, I suppose, they say that about 3 in 10 working age Americans will become disabled and unable to work for at least 3 months or more at some point during their career. So 30% of Americans will have a disability that lasts more than 3 months at some point in their career. So that's the concern that is probably worth insuring against. On health insurance, we're using my employer's plan, but there is an interesting twist here. And I think for anybody, especially with children, if you have health insurance, it's worth hearing this. In my situation, we use an employee plus spouse plan that covers me and my wife, but it does not cover our daughter. And it likely will not cover any of our future children, because instead with them, we're going through a New York State plan called Child Health Plus, which is New York's version of the federal CHIP program. CHIP stands for Children's Health Insurance Program. What a unique name, I know. So if you're a parent, I would recommend looking up if your state offers a version of the CHIP program. And the reason why, quite simply, is that our New York State Child Health Plus is significantly cheaper for our daughter than me going through work. And it has much better coverage. It sounds too good to be true, but I suppose it's not. It's really, really good, and it is true. It's cheaper and has better coverage. So if your state offers some version of a CHIP-style program and you're a parent, highly recommend you look into it. Last, a big one, because the world of financial planning, for better or worse, overlaps a lot with life insurance. There are a lot of people out there calling themselves financial planners who are really just life insurance salespeople. Kind of gives life insurance a bad name. But life insurance has a terrific place inside a financial plan. For 99% of us, that would be term life insurance. It's all we need is term life insurance. It literally will pay you if you die, and eventually the insurance policy will end. And if you haven't died by the time the policy ends, then you don't get any payment. It's life insurance. My wife and I both have term life policies, but I think our strategy behind them is kind of worth understanding. We started with the question, of course, if one of us died, would it fundamentally alter our family's ability to maintain our lifestyle until our children got out of college? And if you look at that question and you say, well, could we pay off the mortgage if one of us died? Could we live a comfortable life if one of us died? The answer for both of us was that we needed some life insurance to protect us against that risk. But we also realized, and I think this is the important part, we also realized that every year that goes by, our need for life insurance kind of diminishes bit by bit by bit. Mainly, it's diminishing because the timeline until our children leave the house is growing shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. So for that reason, I have a relatively small 30-year policy that will provide a benefit over their entire childhood. So you can think, right around the time when we're empty nesters, that smaller 30-year policy will still be in force. But then I have a much bigger 15-year policy that is meant to cover our kind of much bigger risk during these early near-term years of our children's younger childhood. So I think, I'd be interested to hear if any of you are a true life insurance expert out there, what you think about that. I'm a big believer in the math underlying layering some life insurance policies on top of each other in that way. The next topic is taxes. And the main thing I wanted to share here is that I use a tax preparer. I use an accountant. I do not prepare my own taxes, even though I'm probably better than the average American at looking at a 1040 tax return and understanding what all the numbers are that go into them. Part of the problem is that the way I get paid in running this business and doing business deductions and what percentage of the square footage of my house counts as a deduction, because sometimes I sit in my wife's office and record this podcast, right? All those questions like that. I want an actual CPA involved in case I ever get audited. So that's why I use a tax preparer. I just think it's worth understanding that there's nothing wrong with using a tax preparer and you don't have to do your own taxes. And I would wager that for, maybe not everybody out there, but a surprising number of people are probably missing out on little deductions and little credits that they don't know about simply because they're doing their taxes themselves and they just don't know what they don't know. Anyway, outside of that, there aren't too many complications at this point in life because we're not that close to retirement. We use our 401k and our HSA contributions to reduce our taxable income. We get a child tax credit. On the state level, our 529 contributions are a deduction, and we have enough mortgage interest, we have enough mortgage interest and other charitable deductions to actually itemize our taxes rather than claim the standard deduction. That's not exactly a great thing. It means you're paying a ton of mortgage interest, but it is what it is. The next topic, how we use our HSA. So we use the HSA strategy that you might often hear people talking about in financial planning circles. We max out the contributions every year. We keep a large portion of those dollars invested for the long run in stocks. Like I mentioned earlier, we keep a small portion in cash in case we ever decide to use it in some sort of emergency need or to reimburse ourselves for cash flow reasons. But for the most part, we intentionally do not spend any of our HSA dollars on an annual basis. But we do keep all the receipts. And in case you've never heard of someone's process here, it's not too complex. We keep all the receipts so that we can, reimburse ourselves decades down the line. That's the whole point. And the process of kind of keeping track of all this stuff, we keep a spreadsheet, a shared Google Sheet of all of our medical visits. And we have a column that has the date, the patient, me, my wife, my daughter, what occurred, what the service was, and the cost. And then we make sure we have a PDF of the receipt. We keep the spreadsheet and all the receipts. We keep all the receipts, the scans, if you will, in the same Google Drive folder. And then we'll paste a link to the receipt file right there in the spreadsheet. So the last column in the spreadsheet is a link to that row's receipt. So any given row of the spreadsheet, you could see Jesse went to the dentist on November 1st, 2025. It was a normal checkup. It was $150 out of pocket. And click, here's this link to the receipt itself, so that someday in the future, we'll be able to reimburse ourselves for all that. I think the process can be quite as simple as that. That's all that you need to do. The second to last topic, some thoughts on our home and really the thoughts that went into buying our home. Our current home, I hope, is our forever home. The first home I bought, I knew would be a starter home. And this is the second home that I was involved in purchasing. We purchased it jointly, and we both hope it's our forever home. We purchased it in a pretty normal way. We put 20% down. We got a 6.5% mortgage, like I mentioned earlier. And at the time when we bought it, though, our monthly payment was about 40% of our net monthly income. Now, no matter which rule of thumb you ascribe to, that 40% of net income number, that's pretty high. And it certainly meant that we had to make cuts in other places in our budget to make this work. But our thought process was twofold. First, we didn't mind stretching for what could truly be our forever home. This seems like such an important fundamental part of your family's life that maybe it is the kind of thing that if you want to spend some extra money there, go ahead and spend some extra money there. Second, of course, we expected our household income to grow. And even I think it was reasonable for us to expect our income to grow beyond simple inflation. Now, that was an important assumption. You could argue a risky assumption that went into our housing purchase. But again, the idea there is that we knew that on day one, we would be spending 40% of our net income. Now, here we are less than 3 years later, and we're spending about 29% of our net income each month. Our payment's the same, but our income has gone up enough. And I certainly hope that percentage continues to trend downward over the coming years. And usually with mortgages, assuming that your career grows a little bit, that your income is simply going up at least by the rate of inflation, you will see that happen for your mortgage payments too. And the last topic about my personal finances right now is how we budget and how we spend. And now I'm excited for this one because it's evolved quite a bit over the last 10 years. If you had asked me 5+ years ago, I was all in on using YNAB. You need a budget, if you're not familiar with that app, YNAB, to budget ahead of time and then to monitor every single penny that I spent. And I have zero regrets about running my budget like that for probably 4 or 5 years. I ran my budget that way because I think that level of clarity is a wonderful thing to have in your financial life, at the very least for some period of time, to really get a grasp on what kind of money you're spending. But then when my wife and I joined finances, we needed to adopt a system that we both could use, something that we both felt comfortable with. So here's what we do now. At the end of every month, I update our balance sheet, our net worth statement, with account values for all of our cash accounts, for all of our credit cards, and all of our investment accounts. It's a simple spreadsheet. Each column represents a different month. Each row represents a different account. And every month, I update that net worth statement. And also in the spreadsheet, I write down each month's most significant expenditures. We need data to do that. So in order to get that data, we link our bank accounts and we link our credit cards to the E-money software package, something I get through work. So I can pull on any from and to date range, any date range. I can see all the money that we've earned and spent. I can sort it. I can look at the biggest expenditures and the kind of the random outliers each month. I tend to write those down so I can say, oh, right, back in April 2025, we spent $1,700 on a new washer and dryer because our washer and dryer kicked the bucket. So at the very least, I can go back and see what the major expenditures were in every month, and maybe at sometimes change our ways because of what we see. And the goal of that exercise, again, is to both monitor the money that we spend and to remind ourselves of past expenses, maybe to realize sometimes we didn't spend money very wisely. But the powerful thing in terms of budgeting here is the fact that we monitor our cash accounts on a monthly basis, right? All of our bank accounts, all of our credit cards. So what I can do is on every single month, I can get a sum of our cash accounts. How much cash do we have in the bank minus how much debt do we have on a credit card? Not that we're running a month over month balance, but at any given snapshot, there's going to be some negative balance on the card, most likely, unless it's the day that you paid the card off. So the point being, at any given time, I'm running this spreadsheet. We get a snapshot in time of our cash account. And then I can say, well, how does that compare to last month or the month before or the month before? Have we been saving money? Have we been spending more than we earn? And then by graphing those values, those monthly values over time, we can see if we're trending in a good direction or not. Do we have some negative systemic spending habits, or is this just one bad month in an otherwise great year? So one of my go-tos when it comes to budgeting is, you can choose to budget ahead of time. You can choose to monitor some data after the fact. If you want to, you can get in the weeds and get really, really nitty-gritty on it. But the one thing that I think you cannot do is choose to do nothing. Everybody who I know who has some semblance of, financial planning success, they do something, some even simple system to monitor or to track what they spend. Next, while we're here in the present, I just wanted to share 3 simple stories, 3 helpful stories from this year from my practice as a financial planner. I just think it's so helpful to hear about the problems that people face and the way that financial planning helps them find solutions. So the first one of my clients had a hard death in his family this past summer, and that caused him to have this, I don't know if come to Jesus moment is quite right, but for lack of a better term, a come to Jesus moment. And the death made him realize that life is too short. And if he could retire tomorrow, you know what? He would. He was sick of getting on the planes and traveling across the country. And even though you could tell he was a driven guy who I think enjoyed his work, there came a point where he said, life is short, and he wanted to spend more time with his family. And so that begged a question in his life. And the question was, could he retire? Is he ready to retire? And good financial planning answers that question for him. And thankfully, in his case, we were able to give him a really good answer that he should feel really comfortable and confident in retiring. So even though obviously it was a very sad death, there was a silver lining that came out of it. And he made an important life decision for himself that's so far so good. And I think he has no regrets that he made that decision. The second story comes from a client who works for a relatively well-known Fortune 500 company. They earn a great living from this company. They also have a huge amount of company stock from years and years and years of restricted stock units and stock options being gifted to them, which is a terrific thing, right? All else being equal, we're more than happy to get those gifts in our life. If you've got a job that's paying you in RSUs or stock options, that's great, right? It's money. It's free money to some extent. But it's also risk. There's the portfolio risk that this person now has because about 25% of their net worth is tied up in one stock. And then there's the added income risk of having all your future human capital tied up into the same company that already presents a portfolio risk to you. And then there's the challenging tax planning that comes with having millions of dollars, in this case, of appreciated stock, while also earning lots of money from the company itself while you're in the highest federal tax brackets. Not exactly an easy solution. Again, it's a solution that, all else being equal, is a quote unquote good problem to have, right? If any of us said, oh, my biggest problem in the world is that I'm paying relatively high taxes on millions of dollars, listen, you're doing well. That's a great problem to have. But the point is that good financial planning finds solutions to these types of problems. There are also just some more mundane stories, some helpful mundane stories that happen in the world of financial planning. And that's what this third story is. One of my former engineering colleagues has, he's doing everything right. He's got everything going well in his finances. But he had an interesting question, which is, hey, if my new employer laid me off, how screwed would my retirement plan be? That keeps me up at night. I lose sleep over the thought of getting laid off. And one of the things I love about the story is that our financial planning work for this person, it didn't influence any direct decision he's making, right? He didn't quit. He didn't start spending more. He didn't start saving more. He didn't change his asset allocation. Instead, our answer to his question, which was, you know what, if you got fired tomorrow, you'd still be totally okay. Our answer just helped him feel better. It helped him sleep better. And I bet if we looked, it probably helped him lower his blood pressure a bit too. Not everything in the financial planning world has to be about saving hundreds of thousands of dollars or a huge decision, a death in my family. Do I pull the trigger and retire or not? Sometimes it's just, hey, give me some answers to the questions so I can sleep a little bit better at night. Here's a quick ad, and then we'll get back to the show. You probably know that I love listener-inspired content, but this is my first listener-inspired advertisement. Frank asked me, in short, Jesse, is there a best time to start working with you as a client? And the short answer is yes. There are two ideal times. One is at the beginning of a new year for probably some pretty obvious reasons, but the second one is right about now, September and October. It's the perfect time for year-end tax planning to ensure you find the correct balance of Roth conversions, tax gain or tax loss harvesting, making charitable gifts, spreading out any portfolio changes over multiple tax years, or whatever other tax dials we can turn for you. Working backward from the December 31st tax deadline, the time to start those initial conversations is right now, August, September, maybe into early October. You want to give yourself and us enough runway to make sure we get this right for you. So if you're interested in starting a conversation with me and my colleagues, you can go to bestinterest.blog/work and fill out the form there. Again, that's on my blog on the Work with Jesse page. The address is bestinterest.blog/work and fill out the form.
The final ghost appears. Shrouded in a cloak, the phantom holds only a clock. It doesn't seem dangerous or scary, but peering through the translucent ghost, some foggy but fleeting shapes quickly materialize, and then disappear.
Well, as I'm sitting here now facing the ghost of financial future, I have to start with one of my favorite sayings, which is that my crystal ball is as foggy as yours. Now, professionally, I'm 4 years into my career change with absolutely zero regrets. The podcast continues to grow and grow and grow, and I'm looking for more ways to help more and more listeners like you find helpful answers to their personal financial planning questions. And some of you might know that the local firm I work for was actually recently purchased by a larger national firm, still an independent fiduciary firm, but we went from a small local firm now to a big national firm. And changes like this, they're going to come with some positives and some negatives, and I'm sure we'll see some of that as time goes on. But the thing that I'm happy about is that I'm still working with my clients in the way that I want to. I'm still able to write and podcast here. And that seems to be something that leaves everybody involved pretty happy about the way things are going. So that's good. I think this industry, though, this wealth management industry, will have some interesting changes in the future. Now, perhaps some of them are going to be driven by AI. We're already starting to see some very interesting tools enter the world, the wealth management world, that are AI-powered tools. And we're even starting to see some startups that are largely, it's like, a subscription AI bot to be your financial planner. Kind of interesting. There's definitely some use cases, and some people will also never want to use them. That's fine. And we're also probably going to see fee models shifting. We're already seeing more and more advisors become kind of true financial planning quarterbacks instead of that hands-off mutual fund picker. And I think that's great too. I think more and more planners actually doing real financial planning work is what's going to help people out there like you listening right now, right? This industry needs to be better at providing like holistic financial planning, holistic wealth management to our clients. I think we'll also start to see a tighter merger of wealth and well-being. Clients, in my experience already, I'm seeing people want more than just performance, right? They definitely want that underlying financial planning, help me answer the questions about all the other parts of my personal finances. They want confidence and clarity and better lives. And advisors and planners are leaning into that more value-based planning, decision coaching, behavioral accountability, life design, major transition planning. And this isn't, kind of woo-woo. This is recognizing that money is the tool, sure, but it's not the goal. The goal is having that better life, whatever that means for you. And so money is one of the tools to get there, but there have to be other tools to get there too. And that's where the value-based planning or the life design, the major transition planning, that's where those things come into play. On the personal side, we're viewing our current financial plan with a pretty clear first priority, and that's to live a comfortable, not extravagant, but also not ultra frugal lifestyle right now with a focus on our family, both present and future. And of course, there are secondary goals that involve long-term savings for retirement, for other lofty goals, kind of like the lake house you might have heard me mention on this podcast before. But retirement or that lake house or whatever, they don't have precise timelines in my mind, not at all. Truth be told, I enjoy work too much to be sitting here telling you guys that I'm going to retire at 47, I'm going to retire at 53, I'm going to retire at 60. I just don't know. So anyway, there's not a precise timeline to that. Whereas the family life, though, our children's time at home, there are some pretty precise timelines there. Our daughter is now 1.5 years old. It's kind of crazy to think that going a little less than 10% of her time at home is already done. I don't like that, but at the end of the day, it's the way it is, and I'm going to be happy for her when she leaves the nest in 16, 17 years. But the point is, there's a defined timeline there, and that's something I want to focus on right now. And I will say, we're also in a lucky position that independently, both I and my wife saved at a pretty high rate early in our careers. We benefited from those years of asset prices going up and up and up during those times. So here we are at age 35 and our long-term retirement accounts are in a pretty healthy place. And that affords us some flexibility to say, if we want to take our foot off the pedal a little bit right now and focus on some of the other parts of enjoying life right now, we can do that. So it's kind of funny that we do not have a hard defined financial plan ourselves, but we are saving a comfortable amount, not necessarily a crazy amount, but a comfortable amount. Our spending looks the same. We're spending a comfortable amount, not a crazy amount, and we're living life right now and also saving a little bit for the future. We're maintaining our ability to be flexible at some future date without sacrificing our ability to enjoy life right now. And I'm pretty happy about that. That's all I got for you today. That's what the ghosts of financial past, present, and future had to say about my life and my career and what's going on here at the podcast and the blog. Listeners, I can't thank you enough for an amazing, truly just a podcast. Now that I think about it, I mean, a banner year, a life-changing year for the podcast, crossing 100,000 downloads in just this year alone. And we're hoping for bigger and better and more exciting things coming in 2026. So Merry Christmas to you all, happy holidays, and a happy new year. And I'll talk to you in 2026. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors. If you have a question for Jesse to answer on a future episode, send him an email over at his blog, The Best Interest. His email address is jesse@bestinterest.blog. Again, that's jesse@bestinterest.blog. Did you enjoy the show? Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen. This helps others find the show and invest in knowledge themselves. And we really appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next episode of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors. Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors is a personal podcast meant for education and entertainment. It should not be taken as financial advice, and it's not prescriptive of your financial situation.